Russ, before we get started, though, I got to ask you about this Pac-12 expansion. Okay, so the Pac-12, they've added, who is it? Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and I think there was one more that they added. If somebody knows, please put it in the chat. I forget it off the top of my head. But they obviously need to add more. They need to have two more and be an 8-team conference in order to have that like solidification of being a conference in the NCAA's eyes. So, Russ, my first thought was, could we possibly see a Big Ten team jump ship and go over to the Pac-12? I think it'd be the stupidest move in the world. I don't actually think it's all that likely, but I'm curious your thoughts if we could ever see a Big Ten team jump ship and go to a conference like the Pac-12, or could they possibly leave and go to a conference like the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12? What are your thoughts, Russ?
Yeah, so Colorado State was that fourth team for the Mountain West, but
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I could see some cases. We talked about back in our previous affiliations the getting ready for this expansion this year with USC, UCLA, Oregon and Washington, and what that means for the whole conference, not just the Ohio States and the Michigans, but like the Indianas, the Purdue's, the Northwesterns, the at least as far as football goes, the kind of teams that have been at the bottom recently, or for the most part of the last 10 years. And I think at the end of the day, you want your team to stand pat. You want to be a part of the Big Ten. Even if you're a bottom feeder in the Big Ten, it's better than anywhere else. But there's a lot of teams at the bottom of the Big Ten, and Indiana, Purdue might be included, this Northwestern, whatever, that they have the mindset of our goal is making a bowl game, right? Like we don't think we're going to win the Big Ten, especially now that it's expanded. It's that much harder to make the Big Ten championship game. If that's not a possibility and your goal is just making a bowl game, and you're looking at a conference going, man, look at like Purdue's schedule is what number one toughest the rest of the year, right? Like 9 of the top 10 or 8 of the top 10's toughest schedules remaining are Big Ten teams. So if you get a schedule where you're like, man, I got to play Penn State, and then I got to play Ohio State, and then I got to play Oregon, and then in 2 weeks after that I got to play Michigan, but then you look at, hey, well, I could play Fresno State, Colorado State, San Diego State, which, no disrespect to those teams. Obviously, Fresno State beat Purdue last year, but you're looking at that going, okay, well, if that's my conference schedule and I can schedule 4 games, like maybe it's an 8-game conference schedule, and I can schedule 4 games against the Indiana States, the Ball States, and then that's like a guaranteed 6, 7, 8 win a year season. So I can see that case as far as like if your goal is just to win games. But I think at the end of the day, nobody in the Big Ten is going to let themselves get picked off like that. Like they know that's where the money is, and they know that bottom feeder in the Big Ten is the best place to go. Now, if you're looking at like the ACC and people are rumoring it's going to break apart, or even the Big 12 as they're scrambling trying to get stuff together, I think some of those teams are a lot more susceptible if you're looking at another Power 4 team at getting picked off.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think everything you said was, very good point. I think you're right that if a team ever wanted to like just leave and go get more wins, they could certainly do that. The Pac-12, it's gonna be probably one of the higher rated G5 conferences. They're going to consider themselves a Power 5 conference. I don't think anybody else is going to consider them that way. They definitely are going to have a number of good teams that are, that final G5 spot is most likely going to come from the Pac-12 most seasons, but I don't think it's going to be, Brian's telling me my mic is a little low. I apologize, Brian. I turned it up a little bit more. Hopefully that's better. Thank you for checking me on that. But I don't think any team would ever leave the Big Ten just because of the money. Now, we did bring up the SEC. I could possibly see that happening, but I think Brian does bring up a good point here that there's too much history in the Big Ten to leave. I mean, you have so many teams in the Big Ten that have been in it for so long. Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, could any of them ever leave for the SEC? No, probably not. But we also have Cal and Stanford in the ACC right now. So who knows? Anything could happen at this point. I think it's very interesting to see what will happen with the Pac-12 if it will ascend to that highest G5 kind of level where it's like not quite Power 4, but gets up there enough. I think if you add teams like, maybe a Memphis, if you add maybe a Tulane, some other teams like that have been very successful in the G5, you could certainly see that happen. But short of adding a really good team out of the SEC or Big Ten, which you're just not going to do because the money isn't there for it, the Pac-12 will most likely remain a G5 school or a G5 conference. So,
Agreed. Yeah.
All right, let's get to some comments really fast, and then we'll move on to some of our previews. We have Philip. It's now the Pac-12 state conference. That's true. Well, we have Boise State, Oregon State, Washington State. They're all states. That's a good point. Brian says, "Go Bucks." Yes, indeed, go Bucks. There, Brian. Russ Dylan says, "Russy hot takes in the building, as always." You weren't able to give your hot takes on Boiler Express the other night. I was watching.
No, I
There.
wasn't. Unfortunately, we had a death in the family, so my week's kind of been off, and this is like my first day back to normal is today. So, and I told them, sorry guys, can't do Boiler Express. I already told Jr. I'd be on here. So
Yeah. Well, hope all is well with your family, and sorry to hear that. Dylan
Thank
does say Jr. was Zach Guggenheim, exhausted from having the show last night. I don't know, but I was exhausted listening to you guys. I listened to the show. It was fun, but afterwards I was like, man, the analysis, the craziness.